Is there any other introductory things I need to cover? Okay. So for this particular presentation or series of presentations, a couple of presentations we're going to do, we wanted to cover kind of the big picture of what we think is going on as it relates to what has been called ascension and as it relates to what we need to be thinking about for our own personal evolution, our own soul growth, soul expansion. So in my presentation, I'm going to cover a little bit more about some of the sources that I like to study, and Mary will cover some other sources of information. And so you absolutely can take this with a grain of salt. You know, this is just our opinions, and we don't really know everything. And the sources that we're getting this from don't really know everything either. So free to use your own discernment, and you'll be good. So basically what I want to talk about is, first of all, what are the approaches to understanding reality that people generally take, and what are some of the problems that we might encounter trying to figure out what's really going on. I mean, this is a lot of assumptions are being made about what's going on. We've been living our lives in bodies, and that's kind of what we've been used to. But is there a bigger picture to everything? And the structure of the universe and the nature of reality, I'll kind of cover that a little bit. I'll cover what I think is the nature of ascension, and then we'll talk a little bit more about personal and collective evolution through this whole ascension process. And as I said, there's lots of material here, and I can send you the link to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/mindalchemy, and I can email you the slides later. So how do we actually generally determine what is real or true? What is reality? Well, we can start with our personal experiences and our personal reasoning. Our friends and family influence that. We are influenced heavily by culture and society, often programming from society and media, and that includes all of the alternative media that we've been exposed to in the internet. And obviously religion and science and academic study will give people beliefs about reality, but there can be problems with that. All those categories have their pros and cons. Obviously, society's beliefs can often be based on very unquestioned assumptions, beliefs based on biases, and religious views are like that too. Very often, a lot of unquestioned assumptions in religious thinking. Academic science can very be based on money, and people with the most money can determine, you know, what's going to be the science, and how does mainstream science believe things is based often on who's willing to put money beyond certain types of scientific research. And we can also personally deceive ourselves if we have a lot of biases that we want to justify our previous beliefs, or if we have some sense of our own ego that can get in the way of our more objective understanding of the nature of reality. But a lot of evidence of different kinds of views of reality have been hitting people really since the internet received a large portion of attention from people, because now people are not as essentially controlled by large organizations which were distributing the information. Now it's everybody has their own kind of say, and it's more of a chaotic mess as to what's actually being believed, but it's still often big money influences can still affect that. But obviously we have various types of scientific organizations which have done very alternative science, like the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, which essentially are proving phenomena that's very paranormal, like psychic phenomenon, remote viewing techniques, and there's a lot of really good science that's being done. It's not being promoted. People aren't really researching it. So it hasn't affected the mainstream yet, even though the science is all there. So we have a lot of understandings that information suppression is real, a lot of manipulation over our culture, media, and governments through big money influences. And we have increasing amount of evidence of extraterrestrial technology. UFO technology has gone more mainstream. Many whistleblowers on that topic. Obviously our archaeological finds and our history has been being revised, and I think the history goes back much more of intelligent humans is much more longer history than what has been generally believed. And I'm going to I think I already covered the disclaimers. My opinion is no better than yours. If something doesn't resonate with you, just leave it. We're always free to reject ideas that don't match our inner compass. And words are not perfect, channels are not perfect, always room for misinterpretation, misunderstandings. Just be open to forgive and don't get too attached too tightly to any details. So what I obviously, a lot of people know, like to talk about is the law of one material, also called the raw material. This was a series of 5 books that were made between 1981 to 1984 through channeling of a being named Ra. And this material is available at lawofone.info or llresearch.org. And I like this because it's extremely comprehensive, complete, technically detailed. There's been a lot of corroboration from later testimonies, whistleblowers, and even scientific discoveries, not mainstream science as much, but there's a lot that's backing up what I feel suggests this is legitimate quality information. And it's not quite like other channel material. It was very unconscious trance state that Carl Ruckert was in, who did the channeling. And it's very question and answer based. So it's not like Ra had a specific agenda. The agenda was outlined by the Don Elkins, who was the person asking the questions, and he was essentially like a engineering physics PhD professor. So a really smart guy asking really detailed questions, and that's why I really love it. And I do want to briefly cover some of Corey Goode's information. This is a very controversial new, supposedly secret space program whistleblower. And I really like that his information kind of fills in the details with the Law of One, corroborating the Law of One at the same time. And it's very controversial, but so you can take it with a grain of salt. I won't cover it too much today. But I feel like well, Corey claims that he was in contact with the same beings who produced the Law of One material, and that they made that claim to him were the same ones that were being channeled. So that's why I felt like I could do a lot of study and see if he was missing any key points or contradicting anything, and I could not find any evidence of that. And I've also gotten to speak with him in person, and he just seems very legitimate to me, so that's why I like Corey Goode's information. And there are other contactees and channels that are corroborating what Corey Goode's saying too, but the basic message is nothing new that Corey says is we need to work more on love and forgiveness of ourselves and others, because a great shift is coming, and we have to be spiritually ready for every dramatic change that might be coming up. And there are many contactees, claimed contactees by extraterrestrials in person, going back to the 1950s, and there's many channeled entities. Seth Krein, Bashar, Mary's going to cover some more of the other entities who have delivered information, the sources of information. Today I'll mainly be talking about the information from Ra. So what does the Law of One actually say about the nature of reality, the nature of existence? They say all is one, and this is infinity. And they say at the beginning, infinity became aware, and this was an original thought. Everything came from a thought, suggesting the nature of mind is the foundation. And so in this sense, they also call everything that comes from the original thought that's separate, that seems separate, is a distortion, because it's not seen as one, it's seen as separate, therefore it's a distortion of the original oneness that was infinity. And they say awareness originally led to the focus of infinity into a kind of infinite energy, which we can call love. They say that our energy of love is the same thing as this energy that created all of the galaxies, and this principle is very foundational to the metaphysics of the Law of One. So they say the first three distortions will be called awareness, love, and then light. Love acting on free will creates light and all the dimensions coming from the original thought. So dimensions, all physical reality is what they would call light. And we're basically just aspects of the infinite creator that have free will, same as the infinite creator, the same co-creative potential, and it sits beyond time and space, not based on determinism, but we are outside of time and space selecting what we would like to have happen. And this is essentially channeling the same love that created the galaxies. They say at the very beginning there was a experiment set up by the Logos. There's many different kind of like galactic superintelligences that they called Logos, and then the stars would represent sub-Logos, is that like these massive bodies are actually very, very hyper-intelligent and multidimensional beings. And the Logos, our galaxy, outline different archetypes and patterns, like the major arcana from the Tarot and the astrological patterns that we go through for the purposes of setting up cycles of growth and a kind of experiment. This is called a great experiment by the Law of One for growing consciousness back into an awareness of oneness. And at the very beginning, some of these logoi, I don't know how to pronounce that, they chose the basically to give everyone full knowledge, all the beings that were incarnate on planets, full knowledge of what was going on. I'm going to have to pick up the pace a little bit. But basically, they found out that when everyone had full knowledge and telepathic ability and understood their role in the creation, there was very slow growth. There was the same type of beings, but there was a very slow growth, because they said that one who knows not about duality cares not. And so basically they said that there were experiments done with a blockage between the conscious and unconscious mind, and that's actually allowed for the potential of negativity, when previously people wouldn't have considered it. It was like in the book of Genesis, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, essentially the symbol of what took place when people began to understand that they could actually twist their brothers and draw energy, not recognizing that they had its connection to the infinite one. So a veil is what they call the blockage between the conscious and unconscious mind. We also forget our past lives, and the dreaming is very different after the veiling that it was experimented with. But so we're in this weird complex game because of the veiling, is what they say. And also things like the reason we have this ape-like body is because of things like the fact that having thumbs would allow for building tools and fighting war, and then they said the nature of our bipedal form would allow for the development of speech to take precedence over the concept communication or telepathy. I want to clarify really quickly between the terminologies that some people get confused about: densities, dimensions, and planes. Basically, sometimes there's overlap between these terminologies: densities, dimensions, and planes. And I want to first state out, I believe that sometimes when people refer to the fifth dimension as being where we're going, that's the same as what the law of one refers to as the fourth density, based on the descriptions that are given. It's a density of consciousness more so than a dimension too, as we conventionally understand dimensions. But there were actually a series of densities of dimensions that existed before our universe even was born, and some of our consciousness was inheriting understanding from that universe too at the very beginning of the universe. And essentially what everything is, whether it's a dimension or density, is a stage for conscious experience. And that's really the point of everything. Experience of the infinite mind and our ability to classify our subjective experiences then is limited, so we don't really know how to exactly explain everything that we experience. But they say our unconscious mind is essentially what's creating the contents of all these planes of reality. And I want to give you an idea that there are essentially two ways to classify different planes of reality, as the higher and lower, or the inner and outer. And the higher and lower could be corresponding to the different densities that we often talk about, where I'll talk about these a little bit more in detail, but you could say this is similar to an electromagnetic wave, where you have a tighter waveform, like, for example, a microwave. I don't recommend you use microwave, but like with a microwave, you have a much more intense energy and a shorter wavelength, and that's the same principle for all of reality. It's a denser kind of vibration, and because of that, more properties of consciousness become apparent with the denser consciousness. So that's the understanding of the fourth density, is it's a fundamentally higher vibration wave. And the inner and outer planes is kind of like the difference between the physical, this would be the outer planes, and then the metaphysical or the inner spiritual planes, where the mind operates more. And we can actually change the outer by changing the inner. And that's something people are recognizing more and more. I'll talk about a little bit. But in the nature of the inner and outer, they also call the outer space-time, and they call the inner time-space. This has a lot to do with physics, basically. The physics of the physicist Dewey Larson described this, and this was actually specifically discussed in the law of one, that there was a valid physics model where we are actually in 3 dimensions of time as opposed to 1 dimension of time. And these 3 dimensions of time are the metaphysical plane, actually, which help us pick our path through time and And our inner work, they say, has to do with our beingness, and our outer work in space here has to do with our function, because the spatial physical dimensions are essentially just like a stage that allow our minds to act out lessons, act out different sorts of experiences like a play. This isn't really the nature of our reality, but this is the nature of the play that we're putting on for the purposes of further growth. And they say our mind is beyond time, as I said, and that explains our metaphysical potential and our magical potential when we understand that our mind is sort of behind all of the manifestations within space and time. And basically dreams represent going through the inner dimensions, the time-space dimensions. And also they say our mind is kind of like a tree, where the outer would be higher up and the inner would be further down in the tree. And so we can actually, when we meditate, we can go deeper down into the tree of mind and we can actually pick up on anything about existence or reality through meditation and dreams and going deeper into our unconscious mind. It's harder to do, but for example, channeling and hypnosis are ways that people can go down deeper in the mind and communicate with other beings, because we're all part of the same mind that's shared. So we can actually pick up on different realities too, with different time spaces. And you see here I say this is important to think about time spaces more so than timelines, because there's really different just spaces of time and reality. It's pretty trippy, I guess, where we can actually experience things, and these time spaces don't even have to be connected in the same kind of continuum. So a lot of people here have heard about the Mandela effect, and this is something that really freaked me out a couple of years ago. And Corey Goode, as someone who came along, kind of gave it more of a clear description, directly apparently from Ra. He says he got this, that a lot of our history is actually being rewritten as our consciousness evolves. And so people have different memories of the past in collective ways. People agree that there was something very, very different about the past that they remember, and it's not like they remember now. I'll give you a couple examples very quickly. After I found out about this Mandela effect thing, and it kind of felt like it was in a Twilight Zone episode, and I realized all these things are different, like Japan is to the east of Korea now. It's like it just blew my mind when I saw a map. This was in 2016. So one example would be like the Kennedy assassination. Like I had done a ton of research in the Kennedy assassination. There was no way I could have forgotten how many people were in the car. But if you look, there's like 6 people in this stretched car now, and it was 4 people that I remembered. A ton of people remember 4 people. It's just so bizarre that it seems like the timeline shifted the past. Another example would have been the Tiananmen Square massacre. I remember vividly, maybe back in 2008, around that time frame, I looked into the Tiananmen Square massacre. I remembered this Tank Man guy getting over in this most graphic video. And now I go back and look at the videos, and the guy's being shuffled off by a bunch of other people on the side of the street, and it's like it was the weirdest thing to see this. But what I'm trying to tell you is that this is a very common phenomenon people are experiencing, of having dramatically different memories of the past in ways that are so collective that I really think more science should be done on studying this phenomenon. It's obviously very provable that we're misremembering things, but at the same time it's provable that people are having experiences of being in a Twilight Zone to such an extent. This is a very unique phenomenon that our history is changing. I'm spending a lot of time on this. So basically we're multidimensional beings, and how do we actually make decisions to shape reality? And I would say that we shape reality by acting on both our inner and outer energy based on our perspectives and our choices about our perspectives in order to determine the results we're getting in the world around us. And essentially this is our chakras, what the Law of One calls energy centers. And my favorite quote about the chakras, to understand the connection between our perspective and our energy, is to say that each experience we have will be sequentially understood, first in terms of survival, which would be the red chakra. First I want to say, before I go into that, they call the chakras technically the meeting place between their inner and outer natures. So that means the outer dimensions and the inner dimensions are connected. And so this is why we have beingness in both inner and outer dimensions, because we have chakras that are the connection points between the inner and outer natures. And each experience will be sequentially understood in terms of survival, which is the red, then in terms of personal identity, the orange, then in terms of social relations, the yellow, then in terms of universal love, the green. And they say these also correspond to densities of consciousness that we're ascending through. So most of the planet is still working on getting to the point of universal love and opening that heart center more. Then in terms of how the experience maybe get free communication, which is the throat chakra. Then in terms of how the experience may be linked to universal energies, the third eye. And then finally in terms of the sacramental nature of each experience. And they also say, meanwhile, the creator lies within, in the North Pole, the crown chakra. The crown is already upon the head, and the entity is potentially a god. When we activate all of our energy centers, they say we essentially have godlike abilities, because we are now totally one with the creative process of the universe, the love of the universe. And essentially this is also a process to develop, to change your perspective. This is about analyzing our experiences, observing, experiencing, balancing, accepting all of our experiences and seating them within us in a balanced fashion. And this is how we evolve in our experience. But we obviously get stuck in chakra blockages, and sometimes this could be called karma, the patterns that happen. And they say in the metaphysical planes, this is actually the same thing as like inertia. And so it's kind of like when you're driving a car, you have to essentially put on the brakes in order to stop that from happening. And the putting on the brakes process they call forgiveness. They say these two concepts are inseparable. The stoppage of the wheel of action or the inertia is forgiveness. That's the trick. And they say forgiveness of other selves is also the same thing as forgiveness of self. So understanding that we're all one it makes forgiveness actually a lot easier. They say the root cause of blockage also is the lack of the ability to see the other self as the creator, as yourself, or to phrase this differently, the lack of love. So quickly, the densities are considered to be like water, fire, earth, and air. This would be the first density. Second density is plants and animals. Third density is what we generally see with people on planet Earth. And they also call this the density of the choice, where we're making a choice for love. And also they say this is seeking the laws of love, which would be the fourth density, which is where this shift is apparently taking us. And they say this is governed by the laws of love or understanding. And then the fifth density is when we start having more light manifestation capability. And this is governed by the laws of light, which they also call wisdom. And then the sixth density is where Ra is apparently at, the source of this material. They say that they vibrate by the law of one, they see all as one, and that's the nature of their high-level vibration. And they don't even totally understand the seventh density, which is the law of foreverness, and they say the eighth density is when all is one again, and then begins again in a new way. And the density shifts are discrete, so this is kind of confusing. There's not really like a 3.5 density that we're going to be in, because of the fact that everything is like on quantum levels, similar to, let's say you were playing a scale on a piano, and you were able to tune the piano halfway out of tune. It would sound weird if it was out of tune, and that's because there's like a geometric harmonic resonance to a certain vibration level. And it's the same thing with all the conscious reality that we're in. There's a resonance to love that is fundamentally discretely different from the resonance of the social interaction mindset that we're in with our third density existence. So things are going to be fundamentally dramatically different as we go to fourth density. And the law of one talks a lot about this process of the transition to the fourth density of consciousness, and they say the fourth density is a vibrational spectrum, and basically our star has been spiraling into a higher energy in the galaxy, and this will cause the planetary sphere, the Earth, to electromagnetically realign its vortices of reception, which I think that refers to the magnetic poles are actually going to be shifting as it realigns. The reception of the instreaming of cosmic forces, which express themselves as the vibrational webs, so that the Earth will become fourth density magnetized. And I want to quickly mention that Corey Goode says that this massive amount of energy upgrade that's been coming as our solar system moves was actually being buffered for quite a while by these giant superconscious spheres that were able to kind of like buffer the energy so that it was not too intense and jarring for us. It was more of a gradual shift because the universe wasn't naturally giving us a gradual enough process. But he also says those spheres have just phased out. So now we might be in for some serious energy changes. And the transition, they say, will occur with some inconvenience due to the energies of the thought forms of our peoples, which disturb the energies of the Earth's the Earth's energy, and this increases entropy and unusable heat. And this will cause some ruptures in the outer garment. So this is essentially describing Earth changes. Not that we should be very overly concerned with this process. I just want to say briefly that they said Lemuria also went through a similar process. A lot of people have heard about the stories about Lemuria being a very advanced continent that actually was washed under the ocean as a result of what they called a confluence of energies at the end of a cycle, which is like the incompatibility of two different energies, creating an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces on the sphere. The continents move around. And they say that there's every indication that a 20-degree east of north planetary axis realignment will occur. So the fourth density transition is increasingly causing thoughts to become things. When we get to the fourth density, it's more about telepathy. We're aware of the thoughts of other selves, vibrations of other selves. Individual differences are pronounced, although automatically harmonized by group consensus. They also say there's obviously cycles. There's a 25,000-year cycle, which is also called the precession of the equinox. And this is essentially the cycle that leads to the the ascension events where there's this flux of energy coming in. Law of One often calls it harvest, and the reason that they use the term harvest is because of the fact that in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus gave some parables about harvest, and very often Ra would make references to things like this that they knew about. And in Matthew 13, Jesus said that the harvest represents the end of the age, and that the reapers of the harvest are the angels. But in the parable, and by angels, he probably does mean like extraterrestrials. I mean, he didn't have any other word for it. The kingdom of heaven is like someone who sowed good seed in his field, but while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. Somebody asked the owner, when we want to get rid of these weeds, and they said, no, let this negative stuff stay. If you would uproot the wheat along with them, you might uproot the wheat along with them if you pull them out too soon. So let them both grow together until the harvest. And so this is another explanation for why we're in kind of this crazy duality of energies right now. We're basically at the end of this. They say the process of harvest is they refer to in terms of an analysis of the nature of our indigo or violet ray manifestation, and this is for the purpose of gauging harvestability. That the violet ray manifestation is basically where our consciousness is placed, and this allows higher beings to assist us with gauging where we should go next, if we should stay on Earth for the fourth density lifetimes that are coming up, or if we should move to a different planet. That's essentially what they're talking about when they're talking about harvest, is assistance with being compatible with the living environment based on what we're ready for. And Corey Goode recently said in a Q&A with Michael Sala on exopolitics.org that there will be some solar flashes. The sun is building up energy that will release energy based on what he's been being told. That could build up to one very large solar event, and this could be such a large solar event that it could knock out technology. But in the process of having such a dramatic solar event, this could also give higher beings what he was calling super federation, what you might call advanced extraterrestrials. It might give them the ability to come down, openly assist us with not being too traumatized by anything. And this is something why we kind of need to expand our consciousness before this can happen, to understand that the ET beings are real, and we don't have to freak out about these massive numbers of positive beings that are up in our upper atmosphere already. And they say that this could possibly occur between 2018 and 24. Mary will talk about that more too, because of the fact that we have these solar cycles. We're near about the minimum amount of solar activity, and then 2023, 24 is about when it could be at the maximum amount of solar activity in this particular sunspot cycle, sometimes it's called. The Law of One also talks a lot about the assistance we're going to be getting. They say that there are essentially 3 different levels of assistance that happen during the harvest, the ascension event. The first one could be called angelic, or higher self connected, where we already are getting this kind of assistance from our inner guides, and we understand that we can always call on these inner guides at any time. The second class would be the actual confederation, and they say their goal is, as I kind of mentioned, so that no one stumbles or falls away for any reason other than the strength of the light. So they're making sure that we're not going to be thrown off because of something being too traumatizing. We can still grow based on the strength of the light that we're ready for, which could be interpreted as many things, what they mean by the strength of the light. But they say this is also giving us the ability to express the fullest opportunity to express our violet ray selfhood, another way of explaining the totality of our energetic being. And the third process is what they were calling the guardians, which are very, very high level beings assisting all the other advanced extraterrestrials. The process is actually gradual as we begin to be born, as babies begin to be born in increasingly advanced bodies. We're already seeing this a little bit, very incredible children. And they say the total transition period before everybody on Earth reincarnates into bodies that are extremely advanced would be between 100 and 700 years. So that's a big gap before everything completes. But they say actually it'll be 100 times more harmonious once we finally get to this point of very advanced bodies that happen quite naturally by the shift in energy. It's not like traditional evolution where it takes forever for genetic mutation. This is like super rapid conscious evolution of the nature of the physical bodies that we can inhabit. And to become harvestable, basically to ascend, they say that the basic idea is to attain 51% dedication to the welfare of other selves. But I feel like this has kind of been overused, this quote, because Ra also says the important thing is the harmonious balance between the various energy centers of your being, which means you have to open your heart center, and you have to keep your heart center open 50% of the time. And that's basically what allows you to be compatible with the higher energies, having your heart open. And they also say this is why the brilliance or rotational speed of the energy centers, the chakras, is not considered above the balanced aspect. And this means that you don't have to like be out there constantly helping people to be service to others. You just have to have your heart open and keep that intention of being of service to others, that opening. It doesn't matter how weak your heart is, as long as it's just open, that you're still able to be ready for this. Open to unconditional love is what I mean. And they also say a lot about they say that as we approach this ascension events, or major events that we're coming up to here relating to ascension, there'll be a sharp increase in the short run of negatively oriented, or they also call that service to self. It's not like it's bad, it's just service to self-oriented people. They have more love of self than love of others. And this is due to the polarizing conditions of the sharp delineation between fourth density characteristics and third density self-service orientation. So there's this gap between people who are operating from their heart and people who are stuck serving themselves, and this gap is becoming obviously more apparent as we get closer and closer to this dramatic shift, until such time when the Earth simply won't be compatible for these lower vibration people, and they will reincarnate at some point in another situation, just to go through the experience that they're wanting, the next experience that would be similar to what they had before. The harvest will be much less than is possible because of the fact that we do have kind of we haven't been doing the best job at learning the lessons of love. So essentially, because of the complexity of what's going on Earth, it's relatively unique how much has been going on Earth, and that's too much to get into. But it involves genetic modifications and from different ET groups interested in, according to Corey Goode, interested in having their hand in with the great experiment and experimenting with how does a human evolve most efficiently, but it hasn't been very efficient on Earth. And we also have a lot of people that were from Mars. Mars had essentially a failed ascension event, and because they ended in warfare, and a lot of the souls had to be brought here. This is what the Law of One says, and Corey Goode describes in more detail what happened on Mars, and also with the planet that was between Mars and Jupiter called Maldek, that is now the asteroid belt. They got blown up. The weaponry they developed or were using was so powerful that they blew up their planet, and a lot of the souls there are also incarnated, and they're overcoming their trauma still, and a lot of them are still here. And the reason Earth is still feeling like it's recovering from some kind of trauma in like a psychotic way is because there's a lot of crazy things that happened in the past that we reincarnated to try to gradually, slowly deal with. So what's most useful in general for us to be doing? I would say this quote is great. The proper role of the entity in this density is to experience all things desired, to then analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love and light within them. Nothing shall be overcome. That which is needed, that which is not needed, falls away automatically. So this is resulting of our own analysis of our desires, as we recognize that we don't need lesser experiences, then they automatically will fall away. And the most useful thing to get to this point, they say, the most useful exercise is to simply recognize that the moment contains love. That's the lesson or goal of this illusion or density. The exercise would be to consciously seek love in our awareness and understanding at every moment that we can. And they also say we can ask them for help. The Confederation The higher beings are interested in assisting us, and they can also work, as well as the negative beings can work on the inner dimensions where our minds operate. So that's why we can actually have like an angel and demon on our shoulders, because they're in the inner dimensions. They don't have dominion over the outer dimensions. We're still in control of the physical, but they can influence when we're inviting that energy in the inner dimensions, in our minds. They say the brothers of sisters of sorrow, well, they call themselves brothers and sisters of sorrow. They move towards a calling of sorrow. These entities are from all reaches of the infinite creation and are bound together by the desire to serve in this distortion. They say the one being of the creation is like a body, if you'll accept this analogy. Would we ignore a pain in the leg, a bruise upon the skin, a cut which is festering? No, there is no ignoring a call. So we, the entities of sorrow, choose as our service the attempt to heal the sorrow which we are calling analogous to the pains of your body. They say service is freely available for their offering to anyone who calls, but there's different metaphysical laws that they follow, but there is an exponential effect when more people get together and pray or call for help. And it doesn't have to be a specific entity you pray for. It's just like putting out a call to whoever you have been praying for, understanding that that's the positive hierarchy of spiritual helpers that we have. And it's a massive, massive number of helpers out there. And the final recommendations I would have would be just work on your meditation, prayer and contemplation. If you can set up a daily meditation practice, that's one of the most helpful things to, as I said, tap into the unconscious mind and access what normally had seemed off limits to the conscious mind. And find love in every moment, seek the love in every moment. Forgive yourselves and others, and that will heal the karma. See the Creator in others and in yourself. And one of the ways I like to think about this is, my estimation of others. A lot of times we say things are not good enough, not too good to be true, but I would say things are often, our perceptions are not good enough to be true yet, because very often we can recognize the Creator in each other, and we fail to do that. We see the distortions, the blockages in them first, not recognizing the Creator behind all of that. So if we can see the Creator in everyone, that's really, really helpful. And to elevate our perspective, see everything in terms of opportunities for love and service, and to naturally radiate love, light, and joy to everyone we meet freely without hesitation. That's my final recommendations from the Law One. Thanks. And now we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have